it out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 626th edition of Energy Week with George Harvey and Nancy Wolf. Maybe I should do it with Nancy Wolf and George Harvey. I'll be confused no matter which way I do it.
That sounds good. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay. This show is made up of pieces that are appear in my blog. I post my blog every day, geoharvey.com, geoharvey.com. And the blog is a news aggregation site where we have news of energy and climate change. Here on the TV show, we use material from the blog, a picture with each one, a synopsis and a link to the original article. And you can get to the original article by going to the blog, geoharvey.com, find the date, see what's available on that date. It will be one of 15 items that you can find, or you can scroll in whatever direction and find an item called tinyurl.energyweek 626 with no spaces in it. So, having said that, I've warned everybody. They can run away if they want. Oh, one other thing I should say. In this particular show, we're ending on a couple of unfortunate notes. But there's some good news in this. So keep track and try to, keep your self balanced.
Yeah. I wanted to mention that I forgot to mention last week that it was my dad's birthday.
On Saturday. No, on the day.
On the day.
And it was your birthday last Saturday.
Right.
Yes.
But his birthday last show.
Yeah. He was 85.
Yes.
When that happened. He was 45 years old when you were born.
Yeah.
My mother thought she was old when I was born. She was 36.
I was 30. Oh, wait. I was... I don't know if she wants me to tell her that.
But then she
she
had two children after me,
oh.
One of whom was born when I was 12.
I was the last.
You were the last. Of how many?
Two.
Okay. That's good. Okay, we're going to start with a big truck.
Yeah. So the headline here, this is from Renews, and the headline here is Renewables on Unstoppable Trajectory, says Rio Tinto boss.
Speaking at Aurora's Spring Forum in London, Rio Tinto CEO Jacob Stausholm told delegates, despite the current geopolitical uncertainties, the, quote, direction of travel, end quote, of the transition is clear. Quote, we take a long-term view in our business, and it is clear that the energy transition is happening. Now, you can tell by looking at this truck, Rio Tinto is not a fly-by-night organization. The truck doesn't fly easily. I see those things and I wonder how they get to the mining sites, and they get there in pieces when they're that big. And it takes a few days to put them together. They're specialist engineers who design these things so they can be taken apart and put together, believe it or not. Rio Tinto is the second largest metals and mining company in the world. The largest is BHP. Rio Tinto is an Anglo-Australian company, and I think BHP might be also. But Australia's big for mining, and I think that's largely because they've got a geographical territory that is comparable to the United States, 48 lower states. It's actually smaller. But it has a population that's about a tenth of the United States. And so it's got huge areas where nobody lives except a few Aboriginal people, and they don't count, according to a lot of people who don't count.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I should say fortunately, that is a feeling that is going into the past and not being preserved. I have a IQ test for Aboriginals and everybody else. Aboriginals have a mathematical system, some of them anyway. Their native mathematical system is binary. There's no 0, there is 1 and there is 2. Then there's 1 and 2, and 2 and 2, and 1 and 2 and 2, and 2 and 2 and 2. Anything bigger than that is a heap.
A heap.
A heap. So, how do you test an Aboriginal or anybody at all? How do you give them an IQ test? And this is an IQ test that Aboriginals will probably pass and everybody else will probably fail. You take them out into this kind of territory and you let them loose without any idea of where they are and see if they survive. It's a binary test. Either they do or they don't. The Aboriginals will survive, by and large. So that's...
There's an article later on here. There's an interesting conversation kind of about that and about talking and working with your population and working with your local economy. I found that one. That one is interesting, and that's later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. All right, we'll go on.
Yeah.
We have a picture of a nuclear plant in France.
Yeah.
And
so,
this is PV International, PV Magazine International.
Yeah, so the headline here is nuclear has highest investment risk. Solar shows lowest, says U.S. researchers.
This is something that was utterly unsurprising to me. A study by Boston University's Institute for Global Sustainability found that nuclear power had the highest cost overruns and delays, with average construction costs exceeding estimates by 102.5%.
It might be a lot.
That could be corrected. I can tell you how. By contrast, PV plants recorded the lowest overruns at 2.2%. How do you get nuclear plants to be built on schedule and at cost? You tell the people building them, you have to build it on schedule or you pay. You tell the people building them, you have to do it at the cost or you make up the difference.
Or your liability coverage goes all the way?
Maybe.
Maybe.
But,
maybe you become liable for things?
Yes, maybe you become liable for things. This is ridiculous. I've told you the thing about nuclear has 3 kinds of numbers. One is accurate. One is off by at least a factor of 2. And these people have confirmed it for me. The factor of 2 means it costs twice as much as originally estimated and it takes twice as long. The third one is safety analysis. Safety analysis is overly optimistic by an order of magnitude. So a nuclear plant is approximately 10 times as likely to melt down as safety analysis says it should be. And I'm not going to explain that.
Yeah, that's
There you go.
clear.
Okay, here is one of my favorite friends.
Here we have, this is an article from Clean Technica, and the title here is Tesla CEO heads back home, leaving a potential honeybee crisis behind.
I read that title and I thought, what in the world? Okay, a crisis in the United States bee populations called colony collapse disorder. And by the way, there is material here that says this is something that we can learn about and we can stop. The Department of Agriculture is credited with identifying the causes of die-offs. That's a good step towards stopping it, reducing the risk of ultimate disaster and restoring honeybee populations. Then Elon Musk shows up. And what happens? What happens?
Waste. No.
Doge.
Yeah, exactly.
How in the world?
Waste.
Yeah, exactly.
The government waste project is government waste, potentially.
Actually, what I've been reading about this in the research that I'm doing indicates to me that money is being spent by Doge, which is not being made up for elsewhere. The whole thing is a losing proposition.
Yep.
It's not going to save the taxpayer money. It's going to cost the taxpayer a lot. And that doesn't even begin to tell you what happens if you happen to be a victim of a hurricane or something. We'll get into that later.
Oh yeah, that one.
Okay, we're up to Friday, May 23rd. We have a picture of a car driving away from us and an article from Clean Technica.
Yeah, so the headline here is the basics of IRA subsidies and why it's stupid to kill them.
Republicans are doing what they said they'd do as they tilt the scales for the rich. They are attempting to return the United States to past glory that they imagine was founded on fossil fuels. But to do this, they're ignoring market trends that will continue to go on even without the United States. And one of the problems with making America great again is that if you're going to do it, you have to understand what made America great to begin with.
Was it fossil fuels? No, it wasn't
all right,
fossil.
I'm going to list a couple of things that I think made America great.
Okay.
One is the Constitution. Up until as recently as possible, people adhered to the Constitution. Republicans, Democrats, anti-Masonics, whoever was going to be out there, Whig Party, they stuck with the Constitution. Second, education. The United States always was way out ahead of the rest of the world in education and science. The only country that really came close, maybe was ahead of us in science, was Scotland. I think Scotland was ahead of us in terms of science, maybe education too, considering that their population was so small compared to ours. The third thing, and this really made America great, was the fact that we had immigrants who were willing to risk their lives for freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what made America, that and a few other things. We had an unspoiled environment.
Yeah. Plentiful land, yeah.
Did I miss something? I asked her because she's smart.
Yeah, I think that this was a really funny joke about a return to the past glory that they imagine was founded on fossil fuels. I think that's really funny because it's true, because it's just basically it's a reversion to a 1950s ideal that doesn't exist but is in the imagination. Yes. And so we revert to this. And
yeah,
I would say there are good things in the past, there's some better things in the present, there's some worse things in the present, and there's worse things in the past, and we just hope to get better from it. Yeah. As opposed to, it's getting even more separate from each other.
Yeah, I think that there has been progress and there's been reversal.
Yeah.
And of late, there has been a lot of reversal.
Like Paula Abdul says, you take 2 steps forward, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Okay. It's a Paula Abdul song.
I'm not up on popular music.
This is not popular anymore. This is 1980s popular. It's a long time ago.
I never was I got scared by popular music in the 1950s, and I never paid much attention to it after that. I did wind up my college career with a major in music composition, but that was only because I knew that it would be an interesting major, and I would never even try to make money as a musician. Okay, let's go on.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, look at this. This is an HVDC substation, and we have installation of it, and we have an article from Renews.
Yeah, the headline here is Final Offshore Substation Installed at Dogger Bank C.
The Dogger Bank Wind Farm and its delivery partners completed the installation of the HVDC offshore substation platform at Dogger Bank C. Now, HVDC, for anybody who doesn't know, is high voltage DC. I'll get back to that in a minute. Installation of the offshore substations is now complete on all 3 phases of Dogger Bank, which is the world's largest offshore wind farm under construction. It's big. I don't have notes here, but my recollection, it was 2.3 gigawatts.
It's big.
It's big.
It's big.
HVDC, when there was a really kind of legendary argument between Edison and Tesla. Was it Tesla that he was arguing with? There was the Tesla wanted to have DC, and Edison wanted to have AC, and AC won out for reasons that were very understandable from a practical point of view, which is that if you want to change the voltage, it's easy on AC, and it's really tough on DC, at least using the gear that they had 100 years ago. Today, they can change voltage on DC easily. Yeah. So they go for HVDC, and the result of that is 40 years ago, you could transmit electric power practically, from a economic point of view. You could transmit electricity for 2,000 miles. 30 years ago, they had improved things to the point where you could transmit electricity 3,000 miles. Today, using HVDC, you can transmit. Transmit is the right word. Why am I feeling that it isn't? You can transmit electricity practically, meaning that it's you don't lose money doing this, from any point on Earth to any other point on Earth, provided that you've got the cables installed. But if you could generate electricity on Tierra del Fuego or in Australia and had the cables to come to New England, and now that I've mentioned Australia, I should say American New England, not Australian New England, because there is a part of there's a part of Australia that's called New England, and it's desert. It's not like what we're used to. You can get the material, you can get the electricity transmitted, and it's just, there it is. Anyway, now we're up to, let's see, this. There we go. And this is the big ugly bill they're talking about.
Big ugly bill.
And this is from CNBC.
Yeah, the headline here is Solar Stocks Plunge as Republican Tax Bill Worse Than Feared for Clean Energy.
Solar stocks plunged after House Republicans passed a tax bill that terminates key clean energy credits. The GOP bill is a, quote, worse than feared, end quote, scenario for clean energy, as it takes a, quote, sledgehammer, end quote, to the Inflation Reduction Act. Jeffries, which is the analyst, told clients in a note, and I want to point out here, the Senate hasn't voted on this. If it is passed, we can assume that Donald Trump will sign it. But a number of Republican senators have said they will not vote for it in its current form. And this has also brought out a new acronym, which is TACO, which means Trump always chickens out. And if you're talking about Republican Party, they always chicken out.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's going to come of this. I just don't know. There are a number of Republicans who say that it's not strong enough. There are a number of other Republicans who say we've got to keep going on some of this clean energy and so forth. So,
the thing that I was just sort of, it's just that it's a kind of a lot. This is just about shares sinking. This article is just about shares sinking.
Yeah.
And the shares sunk more than 10 and 24% of two solar companies, which is a lot.
it's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's all. That's a lot.
We're up to Saturday, May 24th. I'm sorry I'm putting this picture up, but I am. And by the way, this particular picture was taken by Sean Spicer, who was in the White House staff during Donald Trump's first term. This picture is several years old.
Yeah. So this is from Inside Climate News, and the headline here is Trump signs executive orders to boost nuclear energy and reduce oversight.
How in the world could you do that? President Trump signed a set of executive orders to speed up the nuclear energy development by reducing regulations. Man, nuclear reactors are expensive and time-consuming to build and have problems like waste storage, environmental issues, and issues involving mining and other stuff. And I have a note here which says, Trump wants to quadruple the 100 gigawatts of capacity of today by 2050. That means adding 300 gigawatts, which could add over $3 trillion to the cost, at the cost of the Vodal structures, which cost $15 billion each. So 300 gigawatts would actually cost $4.5 trillion. Small modular reactors are expected to cost more than conventional reactors. And he's not going to be able to get one reactor built in the next 4 years.
What is
We have none. I mean, we haven't built a factory for small modular reactors. We have no conventional reactors in planning. How is this going to happen?
I mean, I have so many thoughts on this story. I'll start with the first one.
Go ahead.
Which is just even this, the way this is phrased, that have a history of environmental and health harms. I'm sorry, but that is a first part kind of issue. That's
Yes.
not have a history. It's nuclear reactors don't spew greenhouse gases, but they spew. Wait, I mean, come on. Okay, that's my first comment.
Yes.
My second comment is that there is I guess I would say that this quote about the new this part here, speeding up permitting process while accepting proposals for new reactor designs would be ridiculous and very dangerous, he added. I would say that sounds like a lot of what Trump does is ridiculous and very dangerous.
Well, I just don't see how this could, even if you're going to regard nuclear reactors as safe.
No, it's you're talking about safety. You're talking about worker safety. You're talking about public safety.
Yeah. And we're going to deal with that next week.
Yeah.
I promise everybody we are going to deal with that next week with an old story which has a new angle.
Yeah.
But the thing that I always say is these nuclear reactors, the nuclear industry has three kinds of numbers. One is accurate. One is over-optimistic by a factor of 2 or more. That's the price of a reactor falls into that, the time that it takes to build a reactor. And one of them is over-optimistic by an order of magnitude and safety analysis falls into that group, and it is absolutely demonstrable that it falls into that group. This is not something where you've got the nuclear industry saying, but only 83 people died at Chernobyl. And the anti-nuclear activists say, well, you know, multiply that number by maybe 12,000.
Yeah.
And everybody in between, but nobody even comes close to agreeing with the nuclear industry.
Yeah.
And the nuclear industry says, we're so safe, you know, compare us with coal, where they're comparing themselves with something that is bad enough that it should be banned worldwide, in my opinion. And I think that President Xi agrees.
Yep, seems like it.
What can I say? And I just don't see how. Anyway, let's go on.
Yeah.
We're behind schedule here. This is from yourweather.co.uk, and we have a picture of solar panels.
Yeah, so here's the headline here is, for the first time, global solar energy production exceeded nuclear energy production.
That's not global energy installations exceeded nuclear installations, because we're past that. In this case, well, let me read the synopsis. Data from the energy analyst Ember shows that solar power generation reached 233 terawatt hours in April, exceeding the 213 terawatt hours. That's 233 compared to 213 generated by nuclear plants worldwide. This marks a significant shift in the international energy landscape. Solar is being installed far faster than anything else for a couple of good reasons. One of which is there's very little in the way of environmental damage from solar. And that's a long discussion, but it's one that I feel very sure of. The other is it produces electricity that is so cheap compared to nuclear, particularly, even if you back it up with batteries to the point where it's more reliable than nuclear, which it can be. It's bizarre. Okay, should we go on?
Yeah, let's go on.
This is a favorite of mine. This is from Clean Technica, and you have a picture, obviously, of the northern, a little bit more than half of Africa.
So the headline here is, maybe there's hope for a hopeless time.
The Great Green Wall of Africa is an attempt to stop the southward expansion of the Sahara Desert. The wall project stretches from Senegal on the west coast to Djibouti on the east, covering a distance of something more than 4,800 miles at a depth of perhaps 5 miles rather, which means we're talking about, what, over 20,000 square miles. That's big. And this is seen as a source of hope. This article has a link to a video in it, and I really think everybody should watch that video. Did you happen to see it? No, I didn't think so. But it's there, and it's just amazing what they're doing in some of these countries. They're doing amazing things. Most of the work is being done by people with picks and shovels, and you know, you dig these holes that are called demi-lunes, and you let them be watered by nature at, you know, which is bringing rain at a rate of 5 inches per year and stuff like that. But it prevents the water from just running off. It keeps it. It builds the groundwater. It has, in one case that I found in one of these videos, because I looked at a lot of videos, wells where they had to drop a bucket 70 feet to get water. Now In the non-rainy season, they have to go down 7 feet. And, you know, these, all of a sudden, you're in a place where people who had hardpan desert are using that land, which was hardpan desert, as farming land. And they've, you know, they're greening the desert. Okay, what happens when that starts drawing down carbon? 23,000 square miles, for example, of land is drawing down carbon, which had been hardpan desert. What does that do? There's hope.
Yeah.
Okay, we're up to Sunday, May 25th. I should mention, by the way, that particular article is fairly well documented, but I wrote it, so I just, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know what's happening with the picture here. It's all I had. This is 2 maps of Nevada mostly, with bits of states around. One of them is the heat that is released from the core of the Earth through the crust. The heat, I should say, that is coming up through the crust. The other one is the temperature 6 kilometers down. Why they need to have 2 maps for this article, I don't know, but it's from Clean Technica.
So the headline here is Gas-Killing Geothermal Energy Bonanza Discovered Under Nevada.
President Donald Trump has embraced geothermal energy as part of his, quote, America Energy Dominance, end quote, scheme, perhaps assuming that geothermal resources are a bit limited in scope, posing little or no threat to his pals in the fossil energy industry. Guess again. And the amount of energy we can get from geothermal is a multiple of what we use. They're you know. Now, there are people don't know this in general, but something that I came across years ago. There are places where a lot of geothermal is used, New Zealand being one. And early on, perhaps in the first year I was doing this, there was a geothermal plant that had to be shut down because of the damage it was doing. And what had happened was it was extracting too much heat, and the Earth's crust was contracting where it was, so it was sinking. So you have to have this balanced, which means that you have to have more engineering into it than had been done at that particular site.
Yep.
Okay. We're up to what? We're up to this.
Yeah.
New Zealand Herald.
Yeah, this one's interesting. So the headline here is Meridian opens $186 million battery farm to boost energy resilience in Northland.
Now, I don't remember. I think this could be 186 million New Zealand dollars, which would be 125 million US dollars maybe. But, you know, $1 million is more than I can imagine, so it doesn't make any difference. Meridian Energy's new 186 million battery farm is a big step towards strengthening energy resilience in New Zealand's Northland, which is tropical, by the way, supporting the region's shift to renewable energy so electric power can be quickly reinstated after a blackout. I said it's tropical. It's actually subtropical, I think, but it's warm. They have nice warm beaches and stuff like that there. Yeah, they're installing stuff.
What I thought was interesting about this article actually was how they were working with local populations to come up with an agreement that makes sense for all parties involved.
Yes.
And then also one of the things that they're doing that is creating, I guess, some sort of harmony is that they are really working on having as many local contractors as possible. So they're using the local population and giving them work, but then also giving them gigs too.
Yes.
And the other thing that I thought was interesting is that this is in this growing trend for grids.
Yes.
and grid needs.
Yeah. And I'm thinking of writing an article for Clean Technica about paradigms, which is basically saying we're in the wrong paradigm. We've got people trying to get us to build transmission systems and things like that. And what we really need is to have our minds in a different paradigm, the paradigm of the future instead of the past. So that's something that I'm gonna go at. But yeah, this is, and I think the business of employing people, dealing with the local population properly is important.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, our next article is from Clean Technica.
Yeah. So the headline here, Empire Wind Project restarts. Gas pipeline does not.
Remember what I said about tacos? Just, okay.
Yeah.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul has convinced the White House to lift a stop work order on the Empire Wind offshore wind project. Empire Wind still plans to generate electricity in 2027, but the Constitution Pipeline proposal some observers tie to it may still encounter obstacles. Okay, there was supposed to be a deal here between Kathy Hochul and Donald Trump in which there was a quid pro quo of we can continue with Empire Wind, but for you know, we will give you the gas pipeline. I think it was a little bit less complicated than that. I think, in fact, the Trump administration knew that it was in trouble on blocking Empire Wind because they had permitted it in the first place during Trump's first term. And they didn't have a reason to stop it that they could supply to a court, for example, if they went to court. And Equinor had already invested $2.5 billion in this project, and all of a sudden the US federal government is coming along saying you can't do that. So you look like you've got something to
I
say.
just thought it was a cute end to this saga. That's all. I just thought it was really cute.
It was,
That's all.
indeed. Okay, let's go on. We're up to Monday, May 26th, and we have an item from the BBC.
Yeah. So the headline here is Wind Turbines Power Surprising Tourism Boom.
The Rampion Wind Farm was proposed for off the Sussex coast. Concerns were raised that it would ruin local tourism. Critics claimed the turbines would spoil views from Brighton's iconic beach and the South Downs National Park, deterring people from visiting. But the opposite has turned out to be true. I should point out the Sussex coast that this is off faces the English Channel. So this is a wind farm that's between England and France. And Brighton is, this has been an important vacation spot for over 200 years. And South Downs, why is it called South Downs? Because of the downs. And the word down here doesn't mean down as a direction. It is an alternate spelling and pronunciation of the word dune. So it's the South Dunes, and it's rolling hills. It's not sand, it's just rolling hills. Kind of like, not as quite as hilly as it is around here in places, but it's pretty hilly. I bicycled 75 miles through it one day and wound up being desperately sore.
Turbine tourism. Turbine tourism.
Yeah, turbine tourism. And there are people who buy houses near wind farms because they love watching the turbines. And my son Jeffrey told me, wind farms are dangerous. And he said that he had gone over a hill in Arizona, and he'd come down the other side, and he saw these big field of wind turbines, and they were just going round and round and round. And he was watching them, and he was utterly fascinated, and he just went on. And then he realized the car was making a funny sound, and he looked down, he was going 90 miles an hour. He said, those wind turbines, they're dangerous.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Agrivoltaics.
Yes.
Sheep, we're a little bit behind schedule.
Yeah.
This is from Clean Technica.
So this headline here is agrivoltaics with sheep and solar benefit all, especially the sheep.
A study conducted at a Lightsource BP solar farm in Australia showed the co-location of solar farming with sheep grazing is not negatively impacting wool production, even in the case of pre-existing high-quality standards. Some data suggests that the wool quality has improved. And I should point out that the grass, traditional grass cultivars, if you want to call them that are used for sheep to graze on, very often grow better in partial sunshine than they do in full sunshine. And of course, Australia's got a lot of full sunshine. So
I'm happy for the sheep.
I'm happy for the sheep too. I like sheep. I always have. Okay, we have a solar farm, and we have this from Inside Climate News.
Yeah. So this is kind of what we were talking about earlier. China invests more in wind and solar than coal overseas.
China's overseas investments in renewable energy sources have overtaken fossil fuels for the first time. The shift highlights the growing dominance of China in renewable energy technologies and the critical mineral and metal supply chains that support their increasing use. And the United States is dithering, and China is taking advantage of it. Got more on that?
Honestly, no. I mean, it's except for maybe the part about for the first time. We're talking 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we have an item from Clean Technica, and this is more on China.
Yeah. So the headline here is China is the world's first electrostate.
Many nations that made coal, oil, and methane the basis of their economies are known as petrostates. A recent article published by the Financial Times says, quote, China is the world's first major electrostate, end quote, shifting from burning fossil fuels to generate electricity to relying mainly on renewables. And I mean, it's an interesting article. We've talked about it before, but now they've got a word for it, electrostate. Okay. But China has got a long ways to go. I came across an article over the last week in which the article said Portugal, the country that had done the most in a shift to renewables in Europe was not Germany. Guess what it was? And it was Portugal that you were supposed to guess. And I thought, Portugal did the most? I mean, I can believe that Portugal was ahead of Germany, but they're not ahead of Iceland or Norway or Albania. You know, Albania has been 100% renewable for a long time, and Norway is 98, way ahead of. Anyway, people don't know, but in this case, China is doing it. Okay. Renews,
Yeah.
offshore wind power.
So the headline here is European wake effects study begins.
Okay, this is a problematical thing that has developed. People knew about it. They knew. I'll get into it in a second. Scientists and experts from Germany, the Netherlands, and Denmark are working on methods to increase the accuracy of forecasts in wake effects in offshore wind farms. In the North Sea, dense installations of offshore wind farms are planned in several regions, and reliable power production forecasting is needed. Now, They've known about wake effects, about turbines in a wind farm where if the wind is coming from just the right direction, a turbine will have a wake effect that slows down the next turbine downline. What they're talking about here is a whole wind farm slowing down the wind for another wind farm that's downwind. And this could be a problem. So they have to figure out the engineering of that. Okay, should we go on?
Let's go on. Yeah.
Okay, we have an article from The Hill.
Yeah. This one is an interesting one. The headline here is Texas becomes frontline of GOP civil war over energy.
Texas has become ground zero in a GOP battle over energy, pitting a suburban populist right that seeks to throttle the state's renewables program against the mainline, I want to note that is mainline, Republican business establishment. A similar red-on-red fight is taking place at the federal level. Now, what has happened here today, I saw that the news was that the 4 bills that were before the Texas House of Representatives had all been killed.
Yeah.
So that's not a huge surprise, but it is something that happened.
Yeah, I also want to mention that one of the things that this article brought up was, who might have funded these bills, and essentially, it's Project 2025. It's one of those things where the people sign their names. You can find all of that, and in this article they mention, where does this come from? Who decides that these things are going to happen? How does a bill get to Capitol Hill?
Yeah.
And so learning about there's a plan that was put forward before election, and that's, yeah.
Yeah, and the business of where is the money from is extremely important. If you hear something, especially if it's not carefully documented, where does the money come from that's behind this becomes very important. Years ago, I was confronted with the fact that there were 2 kinds of sources of information on the cost of electricity from solar. One source said it was one price, one set of sources, and this included most conventional news media, and the other, which consisted of the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, go through that right-wing stuff, said that the cost of solar electricity was too high, and the price they gave, if they gave a price, was double the price that I was seeing from conventional news media. So I had to find out what the truth was, and very quickly realized that I was seeing contracts being signed at a price, and the price was usually lower than conventional media said, which in turn was half the price of what was coming from, these right-wing organizations, Fox News and so forth. But I couldn't figure out where they were getting their information because they were in agreement with each other until the Cato Institute published the actual price and said it came from the DOE. And I thought, okay, they're not doing a really good job of sourcing that because they don't say where in all the DOE information this price is coming from. But having the price to the nearest, hundredth of a cent, I just took that information and went to the DOE and basically found it. It took me a long time, but I found the information. And it was 5 years old. In a marketplace where the cost was going down 13% per year, it was 5 years old, which meant that it was just about double the current price. And there it is. And that spread through the entire right wing, and the entire right wing was giving ancient information. So there it is. We're up to Wednesday. We're up to Wednesday, May 28th, and we've got an item from Renews, and unfortunately I see that there's no link on this. So you haven't seen it.
No. But I do know the headline here, which is
Yes.
Brunville to provide thrusters for a DFO vessel.
Okay.
Not sure what any of it means.
That's okay, I'll explain it. Norwegian company Brunville signed a contract with Vard for a propulsion and maneuvering system for an offshore subsea construction vessel for Dongfang Offshore. Sounds like a Chinese company, doesn't it? But it's a Norwegian company making a ship for a Chinese company. Okay, the system has 2 azimuth propulsion thrusters, 2 well-mounted tunnel thrusters, and a retractable azimuth thruster. Okay, what does this mean? Well, DFO is Dongfang Offshore. Just to tell you what it is in the thing. So the remaining information here is, what is an azimuth thruster? And an azimuth thruster is a propeller which is on an azimuth mount, which means you can face that propeller in any direction you want. So if you want a ship to go sideways, you make these thrusters go sideways. Now, well-mounted means the thrusters are permanently fixed, and those are going to be going in either direction. They will be pushing the ship to port or to starboard, but with 3 azimuth thrusters here, they can position that ship and move it in any direction they want. They don't. This kind of thing has been used on tugboats and ferry boats because they don't want these boats to need tugboats to get into their docking facilities. But yeah, they're building very sophisticated boats. Okay. Now we have a picture that has nothing to do with the story. This is just a picture of New Hampshire, and I added changing climate to the caption. It does come from NOAA, but the article comes from Clean Technica.
Yeah, so the headline here is EPA administrator wants to destroy the climate change religion.
EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin made it his mission to undo a 2009 EPA finding that greenhouse gases endanger public health. Repealing it would eliminate the EPA's legal authority to regulate carbon pollution from power plants, vehicles, oil and gas infrastructure, and more. Now, one little problem that Lee Zeldin has not faced in this yet, but he will, is that if he starts doing this, he's going to get sued. And the federal courts, given what the court history is for the Trump administration, are going to find against him. And this, I think, the reason they will find against Lee Zeldin here is because this is an arbitrary action. It's not based on science, it's based on the needs of power plants that want to emit pollution.
I just want to remind everybody once again that Lee Zeldin lost his bid for New York governor. Just a reminder. He did not win his election, and that's why Kathy Hochul is the governor.
Well, that's part of the reason Kathy Hochul is the governor. And part of the reason is because I don't think Lee Zeldin could win against Kathy Hochul.
No. But just this is a failed politician. Just FYI.
As opposed to Kathy Hochul, who is a pretty brilliant woman. Yeah. Okay, we're up to our last item here.
Yes.
We have a picture. By the way, this is a picture of a storm in Florida. That picture is of buildings in Panama City. Do you know where Panama City is?
Panama?
I don't remember exactly,
Panama?
but my recollection is that it's near Sarasota.
Oh, okay. So it's not.
There is a city in Florida called Panama City, and my recollection is that it may be on the Florida Panhandle, but my recollection is that it is in northern Florida on the Gulf side, a Gulf of Mexico, by the way.
Okay.
I'm not going to take that away from them.
No.
I mean, you know, they lost the Mexican War, and they had a lot taken away from them, and they should be allowed to keep the name.
Gulf. Keep that Gulf.
Absolutely.
So
Okay.
this is from Clean Technica, and the headline here is FEMA has canceled its hurricane strategic plan.
Yeah, FEMA has canceled its strategic plan. Federal forecasters have predicted there will be a 60% chance of an above-average hurricane season this year. The beginning of hurricane season is hardly a week away, and so Federal Emergency Management Agency invalidated its strategic plan, which guides hurricane response efforts. And by the way, today, news came, FEMA had told the governor of North Carolina they are not going to help out at all for their financial needs post Hurricane Helene. And again, I think that what's probably going to happen here is that the federal government, and this might go all the way to the Supreme Court, as might the previous, but the court systems, I think, are just going to say, no, you can't do that. You are not allowed to do that. What is happening in both these cases, yeah, the EPA and the FEMA, in both cases, Congress allocated money for these agencies to work. Donald Trump does not have, and neither does the heads of these agencies, have the right to say, we're not going to use that money.
No, the only body that can do that is Congress. Congress creates this budget, and this money is spent. It's not like it's to be spent. It's spent, and that's the point. It's spent already. It's
spent already, and it's not going anywhere.
I just want to repeat the last line here
Okay.
of the article, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency invalidated its strategic plan, which guides hurricane response efforts.
Yeah.
The whole thing. So it's just let's have less information.
Yeah.
That's the idea. Is less information.
Yeah, exactly.
About things to protect our lives.
We don't need information about hurricanes, and neither does, Mar-a-Lago, which happens to be at an altitude of 7 feet above sea level, which is below the amount of flood surge that you would expect in a hurricane. Mar-a-Lago could be utterly destroyed in a moment, and Donald Trump would be out the value of Mar-a-Lago. And I don't know if that place is even insured, but if it's insured, it's not insured for the value he puts on it, which is $1.5 billion.
I just gave him an idea in my head. I'm not going to say it out loud.
I can think of a couple of things I would suggest to Donald Trump. One of which would be great because it would give him the ability to golf every day, all day. Anyway. Whoop! What happened? There we go.
There you go.
We have a wish for all our viewers. Have a seriously enviable week. There you go. And we hope you all come back and see us next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.